Welcome back. How did it feel for you to share that story to audience and camera?
Well, one always feels vulnerable, which is why I choked up, I think. It's always hard to share something that's so personal. And of course, my daughter's now 18, but I can still remember that little 9-year-old. I can still remember as though it was yesterday, some of what I spoke about this evening. So I'm glad I didn't break down further, but it's very vulnerable. But at the same time, I have to say it is empowering in knowing that if you're able to help even one parent realize how they need to look after and protect their children, which means that child will be that much safer, and then it's worth it. It's empowering.
So what would you say to a parent? Because I'm not a parent, but I have been hearing this from friends and families for, almost as long as there's been mobile phones. So we're talking 20 plus years. Well, I have to give them one because all their friends have got one. And, at this stage, they were like going into high school. Firstly, what would you say to parents in how to explain to their teenagers, and what age do you think a teenager should be getting a mobile phone?
Well, the teenagers are going to hate me. I certainly don't think anything under the age of 16. I'd probably push it a bit older than that. I think that giving a child a phone as they enter high school is probably the very worst moment. They're at that critical age where they're pulling away from their parents, they're gravitating towards their peers, they're suddenly arriving in a school with children who are a lot older than them, and they want to fit in. And the moment you hand them that device, I honestly feel like you lose a part of them. With my children, I had no difficulty. So they did not get any social media when they first entered year 7. I held off. I think my daughter first got it in year 9. My son got it in year 8 and then it was removed. It was a bit of a backwards and forwards game with him. But I think we have to, for parents, what you have to remember is that mistakes online are usually quite serious. So exposure online, once you give them social media, they are exposed to the most unbelievable amount of content. I've seen it myself, and they become desensitized to that content. And so you have to question what you want for your child. I had no problem saying no. I used an analogy that I was their frontal lobes. I explained that all to them.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Thinking
like,
your frontal lobe.
Right now, so
Yep,
I am that for you. So I'm going to, and I regret giving my son Snapchat when I did, because he made that impulsive decision at 16. But I guess at the same time it taught me a lot. So I would really caution parents. I really do believe that year 7 is the worst age that you could possibly think of giving your child a phone. You give them a brick phone or something. There are other options out there that don't connect them to the whole world.
So what are the other options?
Well, we have, first of all, you can buy, I think, an old-fashioned phone. They still exist. There's also another phone called G-Me, which is not one that many people have heard of, but the genius with that is it's got no camera. And most of the trouble children get into is with the camera.
Yep.
And so that's one that I would definitely recommend. And if you really have to give your child, you feel that you want them to, say for safety reasons, then I would say lock it down with screen time. You can go as far as locking the camera off screen time. You can do a lot with screen time. Plus, I would have put a parental control software on there, such as Family Zone, which is the one I used with my children. And in addition, there's a software called FYI Play It Safe. FYI
Yep.
Play It Safe. Now, it's not yet available for iPhone, but it should be by the end of this year. And what it does is it monitors everything that's on the screen at that moment, and it sends a parent an alert if there's anything of concern.
Wow.
Now, it doesn't include photographs, but what it does is includes hashtags, it includes all the slang, you know, the language that they use these days, and you'll just get an instant alert. So, for example, you'll get an alert, your child is texted someone and said, oh, I want to kill myself, I didn't do my maths homework. You'll get an alert.
Okay.
And you'll be able to establish whether or not you need to take action. So it's for predators, cyberbullying, suicidal ideation, drug use, everything. And I think that is, once it's released, that's my go-to. I'd say you have to have all three of those.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you see how it goes. The most important thing to remember is it's not so much the phone, it's what's on the phone. So you can shut that phone down quite securely, but it's when children start nagging for the social media applications that it becomes the problem. And I can definitely say that if your child says they're going to be left out because everybody is on Snapchat, then you need to teach them about real friends. Because if you have a real friend, they're going to message you. I can guarantee they still will be left out if you allow them the app. Because there's a lot of ostracization that goes on within the apps.
With it. So, I mean, you know, there's so many thoughts going through my mind of what the teenagers would be saying to the parents, and the parents going, oh. Would you recommend that parents then get together with their kids' friends' parents?
That's a fantastic question. I was that parent who always called when my son was in high school. I always called the other parent. With the exception of maybe one or two, no one ever called me. And at times, I was the house. I wanted them to come to my home. At times, hosted up to 5 teenagers for a night. No one ever called me. So what I've noticed is the moment a child goes to high school, parents stop communicating. They hand them a phone and they let them flutter out there. And that's the very worst thing that they can do, because our children still need us as adolescents.
Even more so.
So yes, I'd say absolutely get together with your child's friends' parents, if you can find out who they are. I was lucky because my son would always provide me the number. And so I had it all saved in my phone. Everybody's name, you know, the friend's name, and I put in brackets the parent's name, and I had a whole system going. So I had a huge list of people, and I knew I could contact. He didn't mind if I called. Many teenagers don't want you to call, but I would say you're not going if I can't speak to an adult.
Isn't it interesting? Because as you're saying that, I'm just thinking back to the days where everyone knew everyone.
No.
My goodness, so what you're saying is that with most teenagers now that they hang out with, that the parents wouldn't be knowing their parents.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Wow.
They roam the North Shore.
Yeah.
They roam the North Shore. The teenagers.
No, I understand that, but it just amazes me that
don't know where they are, and that's the problem. So I remember once sending a message to probably the top 5 people that used to come to my house, to
Yeah.
their parents. My husband said to me, look, I think we just need to maybe just get clarification that they actually know where their child is. So I said, look, we're responsible for your child for the night, so would you mind just letting us know that you know they're here? No response. So
now I'm just amazed that the parents don't know each other with their kids that hang out. I would have thought that was a normal part of...
no, definitely not.
Okay.
I mean, my son had a huge number of friends, and I could probably think of maybe 5 parents that I met and spoke to.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things that you mentioned, child-to-child sexual abuse is escalating. Can you just share a little bit? I know it's not an easy subject, but we need to know this.
Well, this unfortunately does stem from exposure to pornography.
Yeah.
And so really, children are uneducated. They don't know. They think what they're seeing on a screen is what people do, and let's be honest, they're also little human beings, and they're curious, and they go out and often act out what they've seen on a screen on another child. And unfortunately, you know, you'd be appalled if you knew quite the amount of exposure children are having to pornography. It's everywhere. I did a test on social media. I timed myself to see how quickly I could find any type of pornographic type content on YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok and Instagram. And it took me less than 60 seconds on each app. So you have to know what to type, and I fiddled around and I played around, but it was there. And so if you think about that, and you also think about the age that children are now being allowed those apps, they're being exposed to content that they just don't understand. There's no conversation going on in the home, and they go and they carry it out at school, or I've heard even as young as in daycares.
Sorry, what? you said...
Yeah.
Can you just say that again?
Yes, in daycares.
Daycare? We're talking age?
Under 5.
Whoa, I feel a bit emotional about that. Are you serious?
Yeah. So I mentioned Holly Ann Martin, whose books I read to my son.
Yeah.
She's a good friend of mine, but she's also an amazing woman who does an incredible amount of work out in the Northern Territory. And she said she's regularly called out because of instances in daycares.
Oh, sorry, I might have misunderstood. Are you talking about the adults?
No.
You are talking about the 5-year-olds?
Yes.
What are 5-year-olds doing with...
They're exposed to content that they don't know what to do with, and
But what are they doing with mobile phones?
Well, whether it's a mobile phone, whether it's a laptop, whether it's an iPad, at that age it's offer an iPad, give the child the iPad, they're going to keep quiet and let's get on with our life. That's not uncommon.
Wow, Jen. That's... Hello? Did you know this, Amanda? Oh my God. Louder, what?
What did you say then? I missed that bit because I was busy saying something else. Wow.
I'm glad you're paying attention.
Well, I say it's become
Light relief, sorry.
a babysitter really. So
Wow.
I mean, for children under 5, it's often the iPad. Go and sit in the corner on your iPad and just be busy.
Of course.
Did you see that? A friend of mine who's worked in childcare for years and years, I can remember 20 years ago her telling me a story how she found 2 kids under one of the tables at kindy acting out what they'd obviously seen. This was not when we had
No.
No, you said 20 years ago, yeah.
This was what they're seeing at home.
Yes,
So
yes. And so sometimes it is the case that they've seen what mum and dad had, yeah.
I think I've gone blank. Don't often go blank, and I don't mean to, it's just, wow.
And
I did not know that.
Yeah, and there's when it comes to, say, self-generated content, what we're seeing is a certain number of siblings, or friends, where the predator will direct the child to do something to the other child. So these are children who have to be completely unsupervised for this to be happening.
And having, as you say, they've got mobiles in the bedroom, or...
That's right.
It is like a bad movie. It is. There's part of me that that's just thrown me.
I mean, my son of 8 is screen-free. So he's not allowed an iPad, not allowed a phone.
Yeah.
If he has to do anything for school, my husband or myself directly supervise him. He's the only one in his class. And the difficulty for me is he's now being exposed to content in conversation that children are having that he's bringing home. And not necessarily pornographic content. He's now talking about violence. So children in his class are watching a Squid Game. He comes home and he's asking me, is it a game? What is it? Fortunately, I've watched it. I could talk to him and explain to him why it's so inappropriate. But what I'm certainly seeing is that he can't sleep some nights because he's scared of something that he's heard someone tell him at school. So no matter how much protection I do, because other parents are letting their children watch whatever, my son is indirectly being affected because he's hearing it at school, coming home, and he can't sleep.
So what percentage of parents do you believe are like yourself and your husband? Vigilant? No, seriously.
Yeah, I'd say we are I'd say I'm the only parent in my son's school that in his year 3, that I would say is as vigilant.
Yep.
I.e., you don't go on an iPad.
Yep.
You don't go. You know, gaming. We're not a gaming household. We
Yep.
don't game in this house.
Yep.
And this is why. And I've explained to him. He'll tell you about gambling because I've told him this is what the games are doing. So I would have to say it would be under 5% or even less.
So if you could wave the proverbial magic wand, what would you...
We have to become the majority for there to
How?
be.
How?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd love to know. I think we're in a situation where a lot of children won't make disclosures. So even if they are exposed to something, because they've been given all this access online, they're afraid it may get taken away, so they don't say anything. So I think there's a certain amount of, as my husband has said, we have a tsunami of trauma. It's just the beginning, because of what children are being exposed to.
Yeah.
So I don't have a solution, because parents, and I really don't like to criticize,
No.
but honestly, we do have some control over this. We have no control over what the government does. We have no control over what the big tech giants do. We do have some control at home about what our child is exposed to. And I think that there are too many parents who think, not my kid, never going to happen to my child. I'm too busy, I'll give him the iPad. So, but we really, in order for us to preserve childhood, we have to become the majority. No, I don't believe so.
I mean, you might be able to do a little bit with children, your year 3 son's age and that, but high school kids,
But I'm just thinking,
they'd strong arm you if you tried to take their phone off them.
but I'm just thinking now, because the school, my daughter's school, they have a speaker coming to the school, but maybe every year or I think it's going to be a weekly subject.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the only way it's going to change.
Yes.
It's repetition.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where I can say, that's how it's going to change.
Yeah.
In the school, every week, you're going to that class.
Yes, and I also think there should be compulsory education for parents.
Yeah.
If you want your child enrolled in this school,
That's it.
then at least twice a year, here are 4 dates, you have to be present. Because if you actually understood the sheer volume of what is out there, then you'd be terrified. You would realize that our children are at risk.
I have to admit, and I was saying this to Jen earlier, I'm a fairly positive person. And since meeting Jen and having a couple of conversations, there's part of me that's just gone, but you know, let's get on to the, I was saying to you that a friend of mine, she has twin, I think the boys are now like 18 and they're finishing their HSC. And she has always put in place, I think 9 o'clock, they hand their mobile phones back to her, she turns the Wi-Fi off, and she has always put that in place. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of parents going, well, I mean, you've got to ask the question, who's the parent here?
Absolutely.
And is it about being a friend, or is it about... It's like you wouldn't put your 17-year-old child in a car without giving them driving lessons. And they've got to have 100 hours. Is it 100 hours now? 100's got up.
It's 120.
Yep, on their logbook. That's Ferdy, our film guy. And yet we give them this amazing piece of tech, because it is an amazing piece of technology, let's face it.
Absolutely.
But we don't teach them how to use it.
No, we don't. And also there's a lot of arguments about how we need to teach children to self-regulate. They don't have the brain capacity to do that. Their brains are underdeveloped, okay? We struggle as adults to self-regulate. So with my children, and I still went through stuff, as you heard tonight, And I would say, look, it's a second-hand phone. I've got no problem throwing it in the pool, right? These are the rules. But they understood, and they were actually really compliant about the rules. And I'll tell you one thing which, well, it was beautiful to hear. When my son was about 18, maybe it was a little bit older, I asked him, I said, why do you think it is? Because he's now a learning support teacher in a private school, and he's appalled at what he's seeing. And he's actually contributing to the group now with posts, believe it or not. But I said to him, why do you think it is that so many parents don't want to put boundaries in place? And he said, and actually this was when he was about 17, because in fact, I was asking him about his peers. I said, why? And he said, you just love me a bit more, Mum. He said, you just love me a bit more, Mum. And he actually was appreciating the boundaries.
He understood that your love for him went deeper than the material, that
I wasn't afraid to enforce a boundary and say, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
To be a parent.
Correct, exactly.
And to take the crap.
That's right. And he knew what we journeyed through together. And which, you know, as a parent, when you're going through difficult times with your children, that support you provide them with is, I guess, it's an indication of how much you love them. But I still wasn't afraid to say no. Out of the question, not happening.
And it does come back to also the parents modelling.
Yes.
To not have this thing constantly.
Absolutely, exactly. So what I say to parents, because obviously with lockdown and all of that, a lot of parents had to work from home. But what I do with my son, I never go on social media around him. If I have to answer an email or if I have to do a uni assignment, I'll say to him, Mummy has to do some uni work here. I'm modelling, I'm showing him that I'm using it as a tool, not as an entertainment device where I'm zoning out and I can't hear anything he's saying. And because obviously he's going to need to use it one day. It's not like he's never going to be allowed online, but I want him to understand it as a tool, which can be very helpful and very useful, but it's not I'm just going to zone out and not hear anything you say to me anymore.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to get out of the way and open up to the audience. Have you forgiven yourself yet about what happened to your daughter?
I think I have, and I think I've been able to do that more because of who she is today. So what I've been able to see is that the journey we've taken together, right from the moment she first told me and promised me never to tell asked me to promise never to tell anyone in the world, to the 18-year-old that she is today, who's grounded, full of life, loving dance, hating school. But just she's a really solid individual, and I guess that allows me to see that whatever I've done with her over the last few years has helped, and that's comforting. So I'd have to say yes.
Well done you, and I'm going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.